Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this Day 5 movie review as part of my 31 Days of Halloween Horror series. So today we're going to go old school, and we're going to go back to 1959 and check out a Vincent Price movie, and that movie is The Bat with Vincent Price and Agnes Moorehead. So, yeah, first time watch for me. I got this movie on DVD about 3 months ago, I think for about $2 or something. So, let's just go ahead and get into it. The Bat is a 1959 American crime mystery thriller starring Vincent Price and Agnes Moorehead. It is the fourth film adaptation of the story, which began as a 1908 novel, The Circular Staircase by Mary Roberts Reinhardt, which she later adapted to the 1920 play The Bat. The first film version of the play was the 1926 American silent film The Bat. This film version was adapted by playwright Crane Wilbur, who directed this movie, The Bat. So this has got The Bat. The story has a long history to it, as you can see. Um, so basically, the movie opens with mystery author Cornelia Van Gorder, who rents the Oaks, a summer home in a small town, from a local bank president, John Fleming. While on a hunting trip with his physician, Dr. Malcolm Wells, Fleming confesses to stealing over $1 million in negotiable securities from the bank. He offers to split the money with Wells in return for him helping to fake his own death and threatens to kill him if he does not comply. Wells shoots Fleming and covers up the murder. Meanwhile, the town is being terrorized by a mysterious murderer known as the Bat, said to be a man with no face who murders women at night by ripping out their throats with steel claws. Van Gorder's assistant Lizzie tells her all the servants except for the chauffeur have quit in fear. As they lock up the Oaks that night, Lizzie sees the Bat's clawed hand reaching through the unlocked window. Van Gorder Van Gorder calls the police, who promise to send officers to investigate. The Bat breaks into the house and releases a bat, a physical flying bat, which bites Lizzie. Lizzie fears she may have contracted rabies. Van Gorder calls for Wells to come and treat the bite. So that's kind of the setup in the beginning of the movie, The Bat. As far as cast wise, we have Agnes Moorehead as Cornelia Van Gorder, Vincent Price as Dr. Malcolm Wells, Gavin Gordon as Lieutenant Andy Anderson, John Sutton as Warner, and Lanita Lane as Lizzie Allen. So that's the setup, the premise, the beginning of the movie, and the cast. Um, yeah, first time watch for me. I enjoyed The Bat. I mean, it's not a horror movie like you think from the 1970s or beyond. The older movies weren't even necessarily called horror movies. They were more mystery thrillers, suspense movies. It really wasn't until the 70s where horror became a thing. Um, so you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt that this isn't going to be a gory movie, obviously. It's not going to be like visually horrific on screen or anything. But if you like an old school kind of mystery movie that has some good shadow and light to it and some good setting, then you'll enjoy this movie. I did. So let's talk a little bit about the pros or the things that I liked about the movie. The movie has a great atmosphere overall. I for one enjoy the older black and white movies. There's a certain creep factor to them for me, as it relates to thrillers and mysteries like that, like this. So I found this movie really engaging to me because I could pick out things on the set and things in the background that I find really creepy. Plus, the acting I think tends to always be pretty good. I really like the idea for this crime thriller, the unfolding story and mystery throughout the movie. I thought it worked really well. Um, I was really into this movie all the way through from beginning to end, and it's only 80 minutes long. That has to be said. That it's an efficient 80-minute movie, which is only an hour and 20 minutes. So it's not a hard watch to get through in general, just from a time standpoint. Um, Best of all, this had a good, believable twist as well to the whodunit aspect that wasn't cheap or tacked on like you tend to get in a lot of horror movies or thrillers or really movies, period, nowadays. That really worked for me. The performances are really solid across the board, of course, led by Vincent Price and Agnes Moorehead. Those two really brought a lot of grounded realism in their performances to this movie, and the supporting cast is really, really good overall as well. I really like the look of the Bat, aka the man with no face, especially his bat claw hand that he has. I thought that was effective and just creepy enough without being too over the top. There's nothing horrific about his look. A lot of it is kept in the shadows, and they they kind of do the old-fashioned silhouette, if you will, and figure of him. You can't really see that much of him, but it's very effective for the time and very effective for this movie. There's a good buildup of tension throughout the movie as people start being killed, and some of the characters get potentially framed for the killings. They become suspects, and red herrings, and so you're starting to question who's who a little bit, and those things are always kind of fun, and they certainly are in this movie. As I said before, there's a really good use of shadow and light and efficient camera work throughout this movie. It really sets up the mystery and thriller aspect of the movie very well through those things, as well as a really solid old type movie score, if you know what I mean by old movie, like certain beats, certain musical cues that they use in those older black and white movies are used here, and that really helps to create a sense of tension and really ratchets up the film. So yeah, between shadow and light, camera work, music, strong performances, and a really good and unfolding whodunit mystery story. Just a lot of pros in those aspects of this movie. Um, Getting into some of the cons or the things that I didn't like as much about the bat, there isn't much of an actual. You don't get much of the actual bat, the flying animal bat here. It's really only in one scene, and I kind of get why that is. It's the 1950s. Practical effects don't really hold up that well back in those days, so you don't want to have too much of it on film. You'll be able to see the wires and the other things that kind of stick out. But I was still hoping for a little bit more in this movie, but I understand the practical effect standpoint as far as not wanting to use them too much back in the 50s. There's also a lot of dialogue in this movie as opposed to action and suspense. There are suspenseful scenes and there's some fighting and some shootouts and things like that. But I would say 60% of the movie you have a lot of dialogue given by characters and scenes where they're basically providing exposition to the audience or the viewer of who's who and what's going on. A lot of information is provided through the characters' words, which was kind of common for back in that time. That's just kind of how they, especially in movies like this and thrillers and mysteries, that's just kind of how they inform the audience for better or worse. But that might be one thing that kind of turned some people off. It worked for me well enough. It wasn't overly exposition heavy, I didn't think. Um, I would have liked a little bit more background on the characters that we're introduced to. There's not a lot of depth there. Part of the 80-minute efficient runtime, I guess. They couldn't really go too much into character background or the story. We're given a little bit, just enough to make it work, I guess. But I think they could have had some more depth there. But I especially would have liked more as it related to different characters becoming suspects and red herrings towards the end of this movie at different points of the movie. We're just not really given much for them. And then finally, like I said before, it's less of a horror, aka a horror movie as we know it today, and more of a mystery thriller, which again, it's made in the 1950s. That's what a lot of movies were in the 50s and 60s that we can now look back on as a horror movie, like Psycho, of course, being the biggest one. Um, but I'm just throwing that out there for people that might be expecting more of like a horrific horror movie. You don't really see any on screen stabbings or kills. There are deaths, but they're kind of you don't see much from a visual standpoint. There are some shootouts, some shooting, but again, you're not going to see blood and gore in this movie. It's 1959, so just be aware of that. So, but yeah, that's my review for The Bat. Overall, I really enjoyed this movie for what it is and the time it was made. Vincent Price being in it, very solid. I really enjoyed this movie. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10 for what it is. It's not the most horrific movie of all time, but it's very effective for what it is. So 8 out of 10 for The Bat from 1959 with Vincent Price and Agnes Moorehead. Check it out. You can get it. It's out there to buy on DVD. Um, I don't know if you can stream it somewhere. You have to check that out. Maybe it's even on YouTube. I've never Googled it, but I'd recommend watching it. It's a pretty good movie to watch this time of the year. Although you could really watch it any time of the year. But having a bat in it and the murder is a bat, it's a good Halloween October watch as well. So check out The Bat. 8 out of 10 for my rating on my day 5 here of my 31 Days of Halloween horror series. Um, be sure to like this video and hit the little notification bell down below so you don't miss any of my upcoming reviews for this series. And be sure to subscribe to my channel as well so you don't miss any of my upcoming horror content, not only the rest of this series, but what I have coming beyond that. And if it sounds like I'm rushing through this video, it's because I am. This is the fourth time I've had to record this video. For whatever reason, I've had some technical difficulties, so I'm trying to get it all in before this thing cuts out on me again. But it looks like it might be working this time. But anyway, that's The Bat with Vincent Price from 1959. I hope you enjoyed this review and this day 5 movie review. 26 more days to go. I hope you're enjoying your October so far. Stay scared. Bye.